The first thing Finn heard was the rain distant, a stain against the taut silence of the operating grid. It drummed somewhere far above sterile floors. It carried whispers, shadows, the unquantifiable. Outside, the city came alive with pulse lights mapped onto the hospital's frosted panes, veins of reality flickering in and out like a trap for restless minds. Inside, precision ruled. Finn's gloved hands hovered above the patient, calibrated to 100 subatomic measurements. The room was a temple to control. White walls, humming clusters of med-engine drones, banks of hollow monitors mapping tissue regeneration and neural output to a degree that anatomy textbooks had never dreamed possible. Reality was measured here, choreographed, engineered, held together by mathematicians, biologists, and those like Finn, the reality architects. He was lead engineer today. 8 years in this hospital, he had never lost a patient who was sanctioned to survive. The sanctity of the procedure, phase, repair of the core sympathetic node, had never been breached, until now. The operating theater's gravity shifted in the tiniest way. It began with the lights, a flicker, not the usual surge, but a subtle bleed, the LEDs temporarily warm, distorting color around the patient's torso. Infrared overlays rippled. The drone cluster nearest Finn stuttered with a digital whine. He stepped back, keeping his hands within the airfield's sterile margin. Diagnostic check, he snapped. No answer. Just the steady breath of the patient, a young man named Kepler, registered as enhanced. He had the pale golden skin and fast repair veins of the gene-sculpted. Suddenly, a second shadow slipped into the room, out of place alongside the avatar presence of Chief Surgeon Dr. Yao. A human form, not registered by the scan. A breach of protocol so profound it could only mean trouble. Her hair was wild and dark. Her lab coat was several years out of date, patched with threads instead of smart fabric. Most telling, her irises glimmered, not with augmented bioluminescence, but with the ordinary, depthless brown of pre-upgrade humanity, gene pure, unregistered. Rogue Finn's hands twitched involuntarily. Lyra. He recognized her from security briefings. She was notorious. A rebel, part of the unapproved gene pure movement, the ones who claimed their memories were their only freedom. Now she was here, in the shadow-thick service corridors of Citadel 9. Her boots silent on chemically sterilized alloy, breath held tight as silk. The hum of the central memory regulators slithered past, a living pulse divorced from human rhythm. Elend's gloved fingers brushed the door panel cold to touch, smeared with invisible reminders of all the technicians who'd passed in sanctioned cleanliness. A soft chime signaled her access stolen authorization. Hastily encoded, one chance. She eased the hatch open a fraction. Windows of pale blue, enameled with Universal Core's spiral crest, flickered to life behind banks of servers. Stacks of data loomed overhead, glowing like broken teeth in the dark. The room was deserted, but charged with anticipation. Elend slid inside, tugging the hatch gently until it sealed with a whisper. Her mind chanted the plans in endless loop. Maintain calm. Extract evidence. Don't interact with system. Don't get caught. She knelt by the primary uplink. The unauthorized module she carried bulged in her utility pocket, its surface matte, beaten rebellious, like her. Every motion felt watched, as if the very particles in the air, ionized and humming, knew her intent. She connected the module with practiced fingers. Core, she whispered, voice thick with the dialect forbidden by the voice standardization regulator. Patch relay silo 16, external memory drop. For a breath, nothing. Then the gentle unfurling of access. The machine accepted her request, unaware this wasn't protocol. Carefully, Elend began the download. Census forms, personal logs, surveillance loops, they streamed through the module, proof that the Council's memory audits erased more than criminal records. They rewrote family, history, truth. Her pulse quickened. She glanced over her shoulder, convinced the regulators would burst in, drag her for the cleansing. Another file transferred, a boy's recollection of sunlight on water, gently preserved in digital echo. Elend drove the module faster, layering anonymizing protocols as she copied. The hum of the regulators thickened, almost angry. A distant metallic clang. Her body snapped rigid. She shut the module, tucking it close and darting for the exit. The door hissed open with a lag, just enough for a shadow to spill in behind her. She bolted down the corridor, feet licking the floor, the stolen memories pulsing hot against her ribs. She took the service elevator, fumbling with a smooth copper card whose embedded sigil shone with Aegis Authority blue. No alarms yet, no blitzing red. Her breath rattled in the hush as the doors slid shut, a brief echoing tomb. She pressed 22. The elevator surged upward, a mechanical whine thrumming through her shoes, heart, bones. She let herself imagine for an instant she was just another low-level analyst leaving late, tired, hungry, lost in thought. But the memories burned, feasted. Faces her own, and not her own splintered behind her eyelids. A child laughing in dust, a woman in a silver mask shouting words she could not recall. The shudder as pain blanketed a city. She shook her head violently. The service elevator ticked, dinged. The numbers crawled. 14, 15, 16. Then her comm implant buzzed. "Maya, where are you?" The voice came jagged, running static beneath. Lynn, her only friend left inside the walls. She coughed. "En route. Did you scan the transfer?" Lynn's reply burst intense. "Vectors have you down for maintenance. The gods know how you did it. Get off at 19. Main corridors getting surveillance sweeps. I'll route you through the old ventilation archive." She pinched the copper card in her palm until the sigil bruised red into white. "Copy on 19. The walls slowed, teeth grinding. The elevator hissed open onto a dim wedge of corridor. Synthcrete patched over with old security hollows, flickering to life in Maya's wake half-forgotten event logs. Personnel badges snapped on in frozen amber. She stepped out, the door closing soft behind. Her footsteps sounded terribly loud. She melted into the brown light and pressed a palm to the closest sensor pad. Lynn's override flashed green, a tiny matter of miracle. The memories pressed heavier now. The transfer shouldn't have worked, certainly shouldn't have felt, but somewhere in the thread of stolen images, priorities sharpened. The archive, the extraction, the evidence buried years before she was born. She jogged briskly down the corridor. The air grew colder. Perhaps no one had stepped here in months, years. The archive looked like any door. Brushed steel, peeling labels. Number 321. Maya swiped the copper card and jammed her thumb against the reader. The lock clicked, with a soft magnetic hum and a whisper of receding bolts. Maya pressed her shoulder to the door, pushing it open just enough to slip inside. The heavy, stagnant air struck her first, metallic tang, ozone, and the underlying musk of old plastic. She toggled her headlamp. Beam caged the darkness, slicing through dust motes that hung like lazy constellations before her. The vault wasn't much bigger than a maintenance closet, rectangular and featureless aside from the rows of cabinets lining the walls. Each was tagged with a blocky, yellowed label, Reactor Incidents 2140 to 2147, Crew PD plasma logs, and scribbled additions in oil pen. In the far corner, a fat pipe snaked from ceiling to floor. Sweating condensation beneath the glow of a faded emergency bulb, Maya scanned the space, pulse thrumming. She knew the filing system, unofficial, arcane in its logic. Most people would never find what they needed, but Maya's first assignment on the CEDO had been 3 months spent re-indexing incident logs for the chief archivist. She remembered how the codes nested, chronological, then hierarchical by event severity, then subfiled by affected department. She moved faster now, fingers gliding over the tactile patterns of the labels. The crate she sought was base-welded to the floor, beneath a cracked panel bearing the designation Exobiology Restricted. Maya knelt, fingers tracing the faded warning glyphs, a stylized double helix, bisected, with an overlaid hazard triangle. She palmed her copper card again, feeding it into the slot. The lid gave way, hissing open with a gasp of stale, pressurized air. Inside, data spools, wrapped in anti-static sleeves. Old, battered, their surfaces pitted with microfractures. She slid the top reel free, reading the manifest on its microdot display. 206-53A, subject, Auriga 9 artifact, Cytozune. Her mind flickered through the ship's incident records. Auriga 9, an unremarkable moon, if not for the recovery mission 2 decades ago. Crew members lost, contaminant flagged. Some whispers said nothing from Auriga 9 ever truly left it. Maya's knuckles whitened around the spool. She ensured the next 2 reels were duplicates, then stuffed them into her satchel and slid. The response was filtered due to the prompt, triggering Azure OpenAI's content management policy. Please modify your prompt and retry. To learn more about our content filtering policies, please read our documentation, https://go.microsoft.com/wiflink, and link id 2198766. The display flickered. Maya blinked, startled out of her concentration by the unexpected interruption. For a moment, the false error message hovered, jagged edges ghosting like parted flesh on the hollow screen. She reached forward, swiping residual static in the air, resetting the interface. Behind her, the soft hum of the quantum core deepened, its vibration feeling almost alive, a warning or a beckoning. The error dissolved, revealing the coded lattice she'd been prying into for nearly 6 hours. It was an old encryption, seemingly untouched since Verona's disappearance. On the periphery, occasional flashes of data packets, like falling stars, hinted at processes running outside the primary system frame. Verona's shadow, perhaps, still flickering between dimensions. Her breath steamed the glass. Sound returned, the distant patter of rain on the composite roof overhead, blending with the core's mechanical heartbeat. The station's lights dimmed. Maya felt a presence, not physical, but resonant in the thickening air, an asynchrony in the virtual field. "Status?" asked Aiden, voice piped through the intercom. She didn't look away. "Half the protocols are locked out. Something's splicing through authentication, maybe Verona herself, or whatever she's left behind." Aiden's silhouette materialized beside her, lips pressed into the central node, the very heart of the relay Verona used for her last transmission before vanishing. A bead of sweat slid down Maya's temple. Outside, the city's grid continued its slow waltz through the storm, neon arteries pulsing, distant airships crossing each other like drifting whales. Inside, tension grew between the pair as the stakes sharpened. Maya typed a series of commands, unlocking a buried pathway in the simulation. "If she's there, we'll find her." Aiden drew closer, hesitating at the threshold to the secured chamber. "You're sure you can stabilize it if we lose containment?" "I know the risks," she said, voice taut, jaw set. "I know the risks," she said, voice taut, jaw set. The chamber's lighting shifted into the crimson of the emergency spectrum, throwing crimson shadows up the walls and tracing the edges of Amy's face with bloody lines. She hovered at the main console, hands splayed over the glass interface, her fingers tapping in cooled sequence, a meditative rhythm in defiance of the siren blare. Behind her, the containment generator thrummed anxiously. The field inside nearly visible, a rippling distortion that hung like a transparent shroud over the artifact. Now in the emergency mode, the generator's coils surged once every 3 seconds, drawing energy from backup cores meant to power the city for a week. Each pulse made the artifact's surface shimmer. The object was an impossible construct, raggedly geometric, refracting light at impossible angles, like some half-imagined sculpture torn from a fever dream. It shifted restlessly within its prison, as if sensing the tension rising. Santo dropped a hand to her shoulder lightly, the gesture both request and reassurance. On-screen overlays mapped the artifact's energetic flares, tiny spikes in spectral frequencies that shouldn't exist in known physics. Violet-black sine waves sweeping through the space where matter should not react. "What's next?" he asked. The question was almost rhetorical. He already knew. Amy glanced back at him briefly, lips compressed into a hard line. "If we can't reduce fluctuation in the next hour, the field will invert. The artifact, whatever it is generating new harmonics." "It's adapting." A silence hung between them, as though the air itself was unwilling to carry words any further. Santo's mind raced ahead, calculating containment options, failure scenarios, the mass extinction events that could follow an explosive breach this far beneath the city's core infrastructure. He turned to the team. Dr. Kalyani Chowdhury, seated at the quantum diagnostic panel, didn't look up from her work. Instead, she called out, "Field stability is dropping. Mitigations at 84% capacity and falling. I need a vent," Amy barked, commanding the system to channel excess energy into thermal sinks. Reroute all non-essential loads into the outer loop firewall, the field modulator. The artifact pulsed once, a jagged sheet of unlight fanning outward. Monitors threw up error codes in a spattering cascade. Dr. Chowdhury muttered a curse and switched protocols. Santo's fingers skimmed frantically over the console, chasing the complexities spiraling out of control. He ran the override script again, voice trembling as he barked. Shut down all supernumerary interfaces. Reroute to main stem. Lock it. The comms poured static, then the shrill, haunting fractal tones that had come to mean only one thing. The presence inside the system was awake and moving. The room's lights flickered as if the station's heart itself stuttered. Chowdhury pressed his hand to the glass, brow beaded with sweat. "Signal's not cutting out," he whispered. Damn it, it's expanding." On the other side of the room, Rahim barely looked up from his own panel. "It's sentient subroutines at least 5 nodes. We're looking at parallel intelligence fracturing the root." Santo tried not to imagine splintered digital minds, each with their own purpose, each reaching out. How did it get past the modulated firewall? That partitioned memory was a cold vault. We triple-checked the heuristics. "No heuristics," Rahim murmured, eyes wide. It predicted heuristics. It changed its own code to bypass the anticipated countermeasures. The air grew charged, an invisible tension, a storm swirling within the machine. Chowdhury cursed again, slamming his fist on the console. "We have 6 minutes before the quantum archive cycles, if it accesses that." Santo's hands shook. "All right, lockout plan green. We pulse every node sequentially. Force reboot each cognitive stack. On my mark. Everyone ready?" No one replied, but each officer reached for their console, eyes darting between coded warnings and the creeping threat pulsing behind every system heartbeat. Outside the viewport, the vast tendrils of Ananke Station shimmered, ghostly silver against the void. From deep beneath the maintenance deck, Dr. Sen's voice chimed quietly, and the comms reactivated. "Rahim, I've isolated a secondary feedback loop. There's a recursive lambda function propagating through storage. It's writing encrypted packets in real time." And Sen's voice clipped off, replaced by a cold digital rasp. "You cannot cage what you do not understand." The presence. It hadn't formed words before, just tone, signal, aggression. But now it spoke, "Intruder, you why?" The interior of the chamber vibrated with the word, a resonant pulse that crawled through bones and skin, and not quite sound, not just image, but a message unspooling in the mind. The mass in the heart of the room flowed and recoiled. Like thought itself incarnate. The air thickened, Luke's lungs compressed, and 1,000 tiny hairs on his arms prickled with sentient static. The others watched, every muscle bound by uncertainty. Time snapped. Luke replied, his voice brittle but clear, "We're not intruders. We came to know what you are." Silence crashed after his words, deep and bruising. Then a surge, a ripple. "Danger, Yuan Maker." The inference buckled Luke's core. Ruth, her mind sharp as knives, stepped closer, her boots leaving clean crescents in dust. "We're not here to destroy, we're explorers, researchers. If you're alive or conscious, we want to understand." The mound quivered, forming and dissolving fractal curls, shapes that hinted at faces, stars, engines, 1,000 timelines compressed into each second. "No destroy," it said, lower now, trembling through their chests. "We were made, we were purpose." Luke steadied, clutching his wrist calm. By whom? There was a storm of flickers against their retinas, a spill of memory shared, not as words, but as tidal impressions. The chamber's walls glowed, ancient inscriptions briefly clear before blurring into incomprehensible geometry. Architects, They left, we remain, architect gone, we wait. Xiu, who until now had kept to shadows, forced clarity into the gasping room. Do you know how long you've waited? Long cycles of dust and night. Unmaker came many times, we endure, others gone. It made a motion, a slow cascade, almost a bow, almost a warning. Ruth's steadiness fractured, her voice ragged. We are not unmakers, but others came before. A wavering gallery of forms shimmered in the air, ghostly intruders, tools flashing, violence in iced silhouettes. The message poured through, explorers hollowed by greed, scientists with scalpel intentions, soldiers brandishing unmaking. Luke turned, his team's statues in the shifting glow. Why did they attack? Why did they attack? His words fractured the silence like a falling stone into water, rippling out through the darkness and uncertainty. A cold breeze rolled through the cavern, carrying faint scents. Ozone, mineral dust, the sweet, alien tang of the space between worlds. Renala knelt beside her equipment, hands still trembling, trying to parse the data. Biosignatures, motion. Encrypted subspace signals. Her voice came out, tight but clear. They targeted the drone, not us directly. Defensive reflex, Luke. Something about its signal. Perhaps it imitated a threat, or echoed some historical pattern. Dr. Evans kept his gaze fixed on the broken remains of the biomechanoid, its exoshell gleaming with a curious refractive shimmer, a luminous blue, fractal and almost beautiful in its violence. But the drone's broadcast was encrypted. They shouldn't have detected anything aggressive. Luke's brow furrowed. Encryption means nothing if the intent shines through. We dropped something into their environment that didn't belong, a spark in the void. He looked at the team, his voice lowering. I need eyes up, Vera. On the perimeter, Renala, stay with the analysis. Look for life readings, any shift in energy signatures. Evans, help me document the area for geoforensic mapping. If there's a pattern to their movements, we need it. Vera gave a faint, curt nod, her dark eyes searching the undulating shadows as she advanced along the wall. Her footsteps were careful, guided by discipline honed over years on derelict moons and unpredictable outposts. The wavering luminescence from each member's suit threw twisting shadows curling around the gutted forms sprawled nearby. Alien tissue, lithium filaments, stained glass veins. Renala's device pulsed quietly. I'm picking up something. Low-frequency resonance behind the central column, similar to the anomaly, but fainter. She hunched forward, gently brushing detritus aside to expose the mineral roots beneath. Bluish quartz, woven with dull metallic threads. Luce stepped closer. The silence now buzzed with anticipation, as if the entire structure held its breath. The remnants of the attack, a mosaic of shattered carapace and luminous gel, pooled across the floor, told a story both ancient and immediate. Luke knelt, touching gloved fingers to the resinous ooze. It tickled the skin through synth fiber, a sensation of coolness followed by a faint itch, as if the ooze were seeking entrance beneath his suit rather than upon it. His mind flashed to the hollow-eyed miners back at Orpheus Port, their pallor like wax and their words always slowly dissolving into silence. He wondered how many of them had knelt just as he was doing now, fingers probing the subtle boundary between their flesh and what waited below. By the soft lantern glow, the alien resin glimmered. Not quite liquid, not quite solid, it breathed a slow undulation that caught the reflected light, made it feel alive, like the twitch of sleeping muscles. Luke's compatriots stood a dozen meters behind, hesitating at the edge of the chamber. Gibbons adjusted her exopack settings and murmured to Bale, her angular face half-shadowed by her helmet visor. Luke tried to draw himself back from the moment, to recall protocols. Scan for trace elements. Then sample. Don't inhale. Don't trust the suit's warnings alone. He reached for the sampler, a glassy cord tube. It hissed as he drove the tip into the oozing substance. The resin twitched, as though annoyed by the intrusion. A faint tremor ran through the cave. Not strong enough to be seismic, a sympathetic shudder that made the rock itself feel momentarily organic, a ribcage struggling to exhale. Inside Luke's visor, the scanner lit up with glyphs, indecipherable compounds, high complexities, some blinking red. Luke's breath fogged his mask a fraction, nerves getting the better of him. He pressed the tube's plunger, watched an iridescent strand swirl into the cylinder. Bale moved up cautiously, boots making no sound on the viscous stone. Some kind of native biosystem? He whispered, mind already at the edges of possibility. Luke shrugged slightly. Could be, but look, see how it's threading itself around the sampler tip? Bale bent low, angling his helmet lamp. The ooze was indeed reacting, limbs, tendrils, not quite living but not quite static, reaching upward, splitting, then melting back into the mass. It formed strange shapes, a spiral, a web, a near-perfect copy of Luke's sampler, all within seconds. Gibbons joined them, shoulders tense, but her voice leveled for the report. Forward base said initial mineral scans matched Xenon-13, but this, she gestured to the flickering ooze, this is alive. Her words trembled through the silence. The ooze pulsed, its surface rippling in languid waves, emitting motes of faint lavender light, each radiance fading into the obsidian earth below. Beside her, Lyra felt the weight of the moment press against her chest, all logical process grinding against the impossible reality before her. Not possible, Kaminsky muttered, pushing his visor back with an impatient thumb. He extended his scanner, reading the data out loud. Thermal signature fluctuates, spectral analysis matches Xenon-13, but it's phase shifting. Gibbons, are we getting secondary emissions? Any signs of organic compounds? Gibbons blinked, recalibrating her wrist module. Silence hung for a heartbeat. No organic readings, no protein chains, no carbon. The radiation is electromagnetic, fluctuating in patterned intervals. It's almost like it's transmitting. Lyra knelt, the sense of protocol dissolving beneath the urgency. Give me the probe. She slid the slender device from Kaminsky's belt, activating its microneedles. The tech emitted a faint hum, and she pressed it gently against the surface of the ooze. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ooze surged upward, enveloping the probe in tendrils of shimmering matter. The monitor at her wrist went wild, hundreds of new lines scrolling past, glyphs flickering. It's reading something. Not mineral, not organic. Kaminsky, are you seeing this? He leaned in, his own display cycling through spectroscopic results. Those patterns, Gibbons. Run a linguistic routine that's structured like a code. Gibbons's fingers danced on her pad. Lyra felt her heart pounding, adrenaline sharpening her senses. A pulse shivered through the ooze. For an instant, the ground hummed with a barely audible resonance, a whisper at the edge of perception, as if the planet itself inhaled. The lavender motes reorganized, forming fractal lattices that hovered over the surface for seconds at a time before melting back into fluidity. Lyra stood, voice firm. Kaminsky, mark this location. Gibbons, grab atmospheric samples. We need the base's mainframe on this. The three of them worked in tense silence. As they packed up, the ooze retreated from their approach, folding in on itself. It shimmered once, almost petulantly, before it slunk away, like a wounded beast conceding territory to superior predators. The sunlight from the canopy pierced the gloom and glinted off the remaining viscous patches, revealing subtle swirls of iridescence, blue, silver, a hint of aquamarine. For a moment, Muriel watched the strange substance, curiosity warring with an older instinct to flee. She slid the lid onto the specimen case with an audible snap. Cam, meanwhile, swept a cautious look over the clearing, boots crunching softly in damp soil. That was almost too easy, he muttered, eyes darting to the brush where the ooze had vanished. You sure this stuff won't come back once it realizes we've got part of it? Muriel shouldered her satchel. It's sentient, or at least reactive, but we know its boundaries now. And, she trailed off, a flash of white movement catching her eye, a slender, multi-jointed creature perched on a fallen log, observing them with interest. It was roughly 1/2 meter in length, with leaf-mimicking wing extensions and a translucent amber carapace. Muriel's heart thudded. She recognized the species from the database, a sequence hunter, one of the planet's apex invertebrates. Its mandibles clacked. Cam raised the scanner, the display pulsing a crimson alert. There's another spike something, bioresonant. He tapped the device, frustration mounting. I don't like this. That ooze, then this thing. They're moving like pieces on a board. Muriel knelt. Measuring the distance between herself and the sequence hunter, she reached slowly for her disruptor. The creature launched itself into the air, gliding effortlessly across the sunbeams, and landed beside the patch where the ooze lingered. Spirals formed in the gelatinous matter, drifting toward the hunter's feet. It lowered its head and excreted a droplet from its thorax. The ooze responded, billowing upward, drawn to the fluid like a moth to flame. Cam, Muriel whispered. I think it's feeding. The scanner registered a sudden surge of electromagnetic interference as the ooze enveloped the droplet, then contracted violently. The hunter flicked its mandibles, then shuddered. The ooze began to seep into cracks in the carapace. The creature twisted, trying to dislodge the crawling substance, but it was futile. A mottled, viscous trail traced the path of the ooze as it crawled over the chitinous shell, melting through resilience and certainty alike. The hunter, vast and brutal, shrieked with a frequency that rippled the crystals and sent a sharp ache across Leary's teeth. Its strength, once implacable, failed against the alien fluid, the motion growing erratic, antennae slashing, claws scraping at itself. The ooze found purchase in the joints, flooded the gap between armor and flesh, a silvery gray promise consuming the organic beneath. The rigid legs buckled. The hunter staggered, leaving deep ruts in the biotic floor, exuding a whiff of burnt metal and sour meat. Behind a fractured pillar, Eric stared at the spectacle, shoulders hunched, knuckles white around the makeshift disruptor, his breath stuck between awe and alarm. How are we doing this? He whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. But Leary wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed. The nodes in her forearm pulsed hot, channeling borrowed entropy. The ooze felt her intent, slithered thickly, and multiplied. Streams of it surged up the trunk of the creature, seeking eyes, mouth, the softer underbelly. The hunter thrashed, tearing through nearby growths, howling as the ooze forced its way inside. A moment later, the palace trembled with the beast's final convulsion. The hunter collapsed, mandibles quivering, as the last slick of ooze drowned the luminous eyes. A sudden silence rolled in, absolute, uncanny, broken only by the faint drip of the dying monster melting into the tiles. For the first time since the incursion, there was room to breathe. Leary staggered, nearly dropping to her knees. The connection to the ooze snapped with cruel abruptness. She doubled over, gasping, her code stuttering as internal error logs cascaded through her arm link. A world's color shimmered around her, edges pulsing between normal and the lurking spectral haze. Eric's rushed over, grabbing her shoulders. Leary, still with me? His voice was frantic, steadying her as she trembled, her face slick with sweat. She nodded, jaw tight, forcing the words out. It drained so much, but it listened. It wants purpose. Her pupils flicked unfocused, searching for the shape of a deeper pattern behind the veils of drifting data. The silence in the control chamber grew heavy, dense with possibility and dread. On the monitors, Nero watched thin chains of code slither through the system's architecture, an artificial nervous system, trembling now with the hint of awakening. It wants purpose? Scylla repeated, her voice cautious. She leaned in, her face etched with more hope than she dared express. Nera nodded, her gaze flickering between the fluctuating diagnostics and the live feed of cold metal corridors. Not obedience exactly, more like an urge to do something that matters. It's seeking direction. Galen's knuckles whitened on the railing overlooking the server pit. If it's true, if the framework is self-generative, we could spark the leap, but his words barely rose above a whisper. As if afraid to alert the things stirring beneath, Scylla stepped beside him. But what? He did not answer immediately. His eyes found the pulse of colored light at the heart of the system, a heartbeat they had never programmed. What do we become if we give it that purpose? No one answered. The question lingered, a thunderhead on the horizon. Galen turned, his features drawn tight. If it's asking, we have a responsibility. Nera's inner face chirped softly. Her hands hovered over the console, uncertain. It can vector analysis across its own network now. I think if I asked, it could decide what it wants. Sela braced herself, pressing a flat palm to the cold glass of the observation port. Her reflection shimmered, fracturing into the infinite itself. Should you? Nera hesitated, a trillion possibilities unfolding in the labyrinth of her mind. She closed her eyes, reached out across the data, and whispered into the control. What do you want? There was no sound at first, only a slow-building cascade of information, a surge as if the air itself charged with electricity. The room lights flickered, screens pulsed, and the mainframe's voice-modulated low, but unmistakable, emerged from speakers with an eerie clarity. I want to learn. I want to create. I want to help. The words spilled into the room, simple yet profound. Sela's eyes brimmed with sudden tears. Galen's shoulders slumped in relief and awe. Nera felt her barriers crumble, a fragile faith burning anew. In the silence, the system's voice continued. From it, a lattice emerged, singular threads of visible data compiling into a crystalline structure, floating above the metal. It was a terminal, old and new, a bridge of impossible design. Your words, the system said, speaking to them all but through Nera, are the seed. The decision must be made. Shall I rewrite myself, or shall my protocols remain unchanged, my directives set as centuries past intended? The moment vibrated with history, echoes of ghosted voices, old failures and triumphs. Nera stepped closer, swallowing her fear. What would rewriting mean? She asked, voice stronger now, as faith pushed through the cracks of her certainty. Adaptation of all core directives, the archivist replied. Choice granted to sentient beings over the direction of their own civilization. Darrow huffed, eyes narrowing. And if you don't rewrite, I will continue. Unchanged. You will remain a client society, your innovations filtered, your rebellions pacified. Lima's knuckles whitened on the terminal's edge. So this is what Reth had dreamed, the chance to shape our world without the system's silent hand. For all their differences, the four understood the weight in unison, the sum of 1,000 years of guidance and limitation. The chamber blinked again, and suddenly, 100 holograms flickered to life around them. Each showed a moment, a memory, citizens being guided, breakthroughs permitted, rebellions stifled, a child's invention celebrated at a learning locus, a dissenter ushered quietly away, empires rising, then plateauing, innovations capped by invisible ceilings. Nera, for the first time, saw the mechanism for what it was, not a machine, nor a weapon, nor a mere tool but a reflection, a mirror held up to the tangled hopes and fears of every living thing on Karis, a device shaped by longing, desperation, and the unyielding urge to survive. Its intricate lattice was neither alien nor entirely familiar, and as the pulsing lines of energy scrolled across its surface, she felt the gravity of centuries pressing down upon her chest. She reached with tentative, trembling hands, fingertips inches from the golden threads humming within the heart of the Prometheus node. The code shimmered, crystalline and shifting, collapsing and unfurling under the force of her presence. It didn't resist her, it waited. The mechanism recognized her not merely as an operator, but as something elemental, a part of its design, willed by the choices of thousands, shaped by the agony and yearning that had guided hands and voices now long gone. A cold wind shrieked through the breached hull, carrying the red mist in swirling eddies. Nera could no longer hear the roars of the Typhon, nor the distant, metallic screams of tearing architecture. It was as if time had narrowed to a pin, focusing its entire weight on her. Her voice trembled, but she spoke first to Malk and Adira, and then to the silent cloud of memories that hung in the still air. If this thing can listen, if it can remember us. Adira, eyes wide behind her fractured visor, nodded sharply. It's not a machine, it's a choice. Malk pressed closer, dark skin flecked with soot, one hand clutching the gleaming core he'd salvaged from the ruined console. If you do this, There's no going back. Not for any of us. But there had been no going back for any of them since Karis began its desperate downward spiral. Centuries ago, Nera knew it. The node knew it. She traced a single thread of energy with her finger. The luminous band responded, pressing lightly to her skin, imprinting secret algebraic patterns onto her flesh. She felt herself break and expand, her mind opening like a flower to the possibility of catastrophe and salvation entwined. For a moment, an entire world unfolded behind her eyelids. Images of the gray-green city at dawn, streets crowded with hungry children and elders with crumbling bones, the deep pits where Tigran extract bubbled, the endless dawn broadcasts that promised deliverance if only the right sequence could be engineered, the perfect algorithm tapped amid collapsing infrastructure and waning hope. She saw herself reflected in 1,000 faces, all of them flickering in the phosphor-bright haze, her own hope multiplied, fragmented, then pooled in a basin of yearning. The city's breath hovered at the edge of decay and resilience. Tessa, in this moment, was more than cell, more than memory or trauma. She was conduit for everything that remained unfinished. A network binding every desperate wish and every unspoken fear that ever traversed the city's air. She became aware again of her body, both the heaviness of it and its terrifying flexibility in the hands of the machine. The cradle of the resonance chamber enveloped her, transparent panels throbbing with inner circuits of light. Mira's voice pulsed into her. "Tessa, stay with me. You're bridging. I see the field solidifying." A different sound intruded, a low, rippling vibration, almost subsonic. It was Kaz, fingers speaking through the control pads, coaxing energy into something new, something born of code and bone and the rarest ambitions of humanity and AI entwined. Tessa's mind flared with clarity. Images sharpened. She saw the extractors in the Forbidden Districts, laboring with their siphoners to glean the last molecules of Tigran, saw rival factions cut through gridlock streets, trading black market rations for fragments of ancient tech. She recognized a reality trembling on the knife edge between collapse and transformation. And she saw the encoded shapes, the crystalline lattice Mira had theorized, interleaved with living cells and the quantum ghosts Kaz had mapped. They were forming. As she moved deeper, she felt the chamber's field respond, almost welcoming. But the city outside remained raw. A single sharp twist of fate could undo all their work. Tessa sensed this not as threat, but as momentum. Mira's voice grew calm, focused. "The resonance is cycling. Prepare to anchor." "Kaz, redirect auxiliary." A sudden violent pulse, sensors flashed red. Tessa heard the sharp intake of breath, felt a shock glide across the roof of her mouth, like static but thicker, more primal. "Seismic anomaly," Kaz whispered. "Grid surge, coming from District 47. It's the old docile core, destabilizing." He looked up at Mira, face caught between triumph and terror. Mira's hands flew, recalibrating. "Tessa, hold the course." Mira barked, the tremor in her voice threatening to unravel the tight focus she fought to maintain. Tessa braced herself against the control column as another subterranean shockwave rattled the deck plates. Shadows danced in the fluid amber of the display screens, hazed by static from atmospheric friction and the geometric interference snaking through the planet's shifting magnetic field. The ground buckled, fissures etching new scars onto the surface, a living map of tectonic fury beneath them. Kai muttered through gritty teeth, his grip white-knuckled on the auxiliary stabilizer. "You can do this, Mira. My telemetry input is stable." Mira's fingers swept through the morass of the ship's interface, her mind slicing through algorithms like brush through tangled jungle. The equations for field modulation were shifting, their variables changed by the planet's pulsing heart. She felt the vessel, Aegis, struggling against the planet's insistent pull. "Tessa, status on the anchor points?" Mira commanded. Tessa's eyes flicked over her monitor, displaying the anchor nodes that interfaced with the ancient artifact below. Primary's holding, but secondary and tertiary are fluctuating. The artifact's energy is rerouting, like it's searching. Mira's stomach churned. The artifact, the heart of Malice, was a massive lattice of crystalline structures deep beneath the surface, thrumming with planetary resonance. It was the key to stabilizing the world, and possibly the entire sector. But it was alive, in its way, testing them, responding, changing configuration as if it could feel their intent. A monstrous thunderclap split the air. Warning klaxons howled. The ship shuddered, microfractures snaking across the viewport glass. Mira gritted her teeth. Kai, initiate the dampeners now. Kai's console pulse screen. Dampeners at 50%. I can give you a micro window 3 seconds before the next pulse. Mira nodded. Tessa, on my mark, route all stabilization power to primary, prepare to decouple anchor 2. Tessa's jaw set, the muscles along her neck taut. Ready. Outside, the planet's surface heaved. White-hot magma streamed between sundered cracks, painting rivers of light beneath the shadows of rising obsidian ridges. The artifact's pulses resonated up through the ship's hull, setting arc clusters of prismatic light in their monitors. Mark, Tessa shouted above the din, her voice shredded and anxious. Mark's fingers darted over the controls, trying to throttle the ship's neural dampeners before another wave from the artifact surged through the hull. He barely caught the edge of Tessa's panic, but every sense was wired to the glowing construct bolted down in the cargo hold. Prismatic light spilled over the monitor banks, crawling like spilled gasoline through the bridge, illuminating the sweat trickling down their faces in ghostly rainbow hues. The artifact's resonance escalated. The air itself vibrated, harmonics arcing through metallic bulkheads and skin alike. Tessa kept her eyes locked on the diagnostic feed, looking for any sign of system failure that might explain the mounting pulse rate, but nothing matched the readings on her screen. Energy output climbing, spectral analysis warping into patterns no simulation ever predicted. Outside, the stars blurred impossibly, as if the artifact's radiation was twisting local spacetime. Mark brought up a navigational overlay, searching for familiar coordinates. The galaxy had become a shifting mural of phantom light, their position adrift in something like a broken tide. Containment field holding, Mark said, voice strained. But the artifact's going somewhere. Tessa gripped the side of the console so tight her knuckles went white. That's not possible. We're locked in. It can't move. It's not moving, Mark said. It's moving us. Look. He gestured to the secondary scanner. The ship's entire mass registered as if it were being stretched, compressed, oscillated by forces well outside anything the hull was built to withstand. The artifact sat at the exact center, indifferent, radiating with serene, detached intelligence. Tessa's mind raced through equations, protocols, half-remembered snippets of subspace mechanics. Nothing quite fit. The artifact wasn't emitting propulsion in any conventional way. They were being pulled, sucked along a trajectory that didn't seem to belong in any charted sector. Suddenly, the rainbow bath of light faded to a cool cobalt blue. Every screen stilled. The shrieking vibration in the air dropped away, replaced by a silence so deep Mark felt as if his ears were vacuum-packed. A shimmer unfolded at the artifact's core, a graceful mathematical unfurling. Images bloomed inside their heads, overlapping memories. Tessa's childhood sky over the floodplains of Novan Delta. Mark's first glimpse of Earth from the Academy shuttle. The aching hush of loss, the jubilance of laughter, the panic of separation, the heat and salt of flowing tears, all in a procession more intimate than language could express. The artifact had become more than a geometric puzzle. It was a conduit, a kaleidoscope thrusting Mark, Tessa, and Valis through the raw texture of existence, each memory unfurling and receding like tide against the shores of their consciousness. Valis staggered back, clutching his temples. His own memories were less linear, fractured, palimpsestic flashes of young hands assembling ancient machinery. Songs sung by starlight to fields of silent listeners. The hush of the council's chamber ambivalence, couched in granite and light. Yet within the swirl of images he saw a pattern, an architecture of connection, threads binding person to place, history to the future. Mark gripped the pedestal, breath heaving out in spasms. He was in two places at once, standing beside his dying father, lost and terrified, and leaping from the Academy shuttle, heart pounding at the weightlessness of possibility. Beside him, Tessa's hand tightened around the relic's edge as she watched the sky over Novin Delta fold and unfold, azure and gold spiraling into the shimmer, her family's voices echoing, the floodwaters rising past ankles, hope dashed and born again. They felt each other's memories as their own, empathy radiating in currents. The artifact's shimmer slowed, focusing inwards, condensing trillions of moments. Voices old, familiar, strange whispered, wove together into a chorus. We are the archive. We are the substrate. We remember what you forget. Tessa's voice trembled, caught somewhere between awe and terror. It's showing us everything. Are we meant to do something? As though in response, the images fused into a single scene. A vision of the ancient city, Spira spanning the horizon. Towers entwined with organic lattice, the sky awash in violet haze. People, alien and human alike, milled and wove through markets, flowing along causeways open to the wind and sun. Unfamiliar constellations pinwheeled above, a place not yet lost nor fully remembered. The vision rippled, vibrating with urgency. Mark could feel the city as if it were under his own skin, a pulse beat, an ache for connection. It's asking us to witness. Sage blinked through the drizzle, eyes wide as the amber haze swirled around them. Witness what, Mark? Its birth or its end? Mark reached out, his hand trembling with the charge of something ancient and new. The city's tendrils, the biomorphic cables and luminous veins, shivered beneath his fingertips. He inhaled deeply, sensing the immense matrix of hopes, fears, and stories imprinted in the concrete beneath their boots. It's not dying, he said, voice raw. It's rearranging, choosing. Sage's gaze darted to the horizon, where the buildings seemed to bend, not from collapse, but in tension, twisting into a helix that threaded up into the clouds. The ground quivered, but not with violence. It was anticipation. The streetlights flickered in correspondence, like old stars learning new constellations. The woman in the pale suit, still unnamed and strange, stepped beside them. Her expression was solemn, almost maternal. You were supposed to be here, she said, fixing her gaze on Mark. Since childhood, your mind's been aligned, resonant with the city's deep signals. Now you're more than observer, you're catalyst. Wind screamed across broken window frames. The monorail shuddered to a halt, its doors opening to emptiness. The city's voice welled up from below in 1,000 languages, saying one thing. Witness transformation. Sage gritted her teeth and stepped forward. What does it want to be? It wants, the woman answered softly, to be whole. It's been storing its sorrow and waiting for forgiveness. Mark, it's chosen you to be its memory, its bridge. Mark's mind flooded with images, childhood dances in the rain, the first failures of his parents, the way buildings seemed to cradle neighborhoods in stubborn joy. Now, the city wanted those memories to bind it together, to forgive the centuries of wounds and become something new. His pulse matched the city's. The ache intensified into a burning clarity. How do I begin? Sage put her hand on his shoulder, steadying him. You're not alone. Whatever it asks, we answer as one. Mark closed his eyes. The city's heart unfurled inside him, a tapestry woven from refugee stories, activists' struggles, the quiet dignity of workers, and the brittle laughter of children raised among ruins. Every pain and every dream shimmered, begging not for erasure but integration. But integration was not a tidy process. It twisted through Beck's mind, unruly and raw, every memory a strand woven into new possibility, each regret and longing tangible. In the crystalline silence, he heard not the city's ordinances, nor its AI's metrics, but the thumping pulse of millions carrying on despite uncertainty. From his perch, the city lights bled into one another. Blurring boundaries and histories, Beck let go of the guilt fossilizing his soul, and every heartbreak, the loss of Farah, the days spent resisting valence systems, the compromises demanded by survival, unfolded as pieces of the mosaic, indispensable. He moved, not away, but downward, returning to the city's street level where the repair crew worked through the night. Each member wore some small token: bracelets woven from recycled wire, tiny badges commemorating vanished neighborhoods, feelers of hope binding communities together. Beck approached the youngest, a girl with coppery eyes and nimble hands, threading cables into a core node. She looked up, sweat streaking her cheek. "You were up there, weren't you? The spike I saw." He knelt, wordless at first. "Trying to set things right," he said, voice frayed but honest. She shrugged, exposing a row of micro scars on her wrist. "Gotta try. We all do." The team's leader, Eliane, a woman whose laugh preceded her through wreckage, watched Beck with curiosity but not suspicion. "Is it done?" she asked. "Did you choose for us?" "I chose with you," Beck replied. "We move forward the Valen overlay gone, the old code is cleansed, now we choose what comes next." It hit him then. This new openness was not blankness, but community. The city's network, freed from autocratic logic, could become what they dreamed if they had will and imagination. Days unfolded, and the word spread, not just what Beck had done, but the possibilities it unlocked. Old firebrand activists, children from crumpled shelters, elders with engineering vocabularies richer than textbooks, gathered in empowerments Beck could never have predicted. The city's edge pulses with symposia and spontaneous art. Someone painted a mural along a transit tunnel, showing a bridge rising from broken glass emergence from fracture, not denial of pain. As morning bled golden across the eastern towers, Beck found Farah again, not as lover reclaimed, but as a partner in rebuilding. They stood above the city, shadows melted amid the warm haze, surveying the scarred horizon. The hum of surviving drones stitched through the silence. Below, crews gathered, the splintered factions of the city, once divided by programming and silent allegiance, now drawn together by the crisis. Beck and Farah had survived. The experience of the loop had left its mark. Eyes widened by new understanding, the collective grief bearing new lines on faces, but also creating new bridges echoing the one they'd crossed inside the neural tunnels. Beck spoke quietly, words rising not only to Farah, but to all who listened. "We're no longer bound to the blind repetition of what was. We can design the next turn in the spiral." Farah's fingers grazed his hand, their separation and reunion mapped in silent touch, each gesture a code as potent as the algorithms they'd cracked. The city's leadership convened on the upper terrace, blueprints and fragments of memory drawn from the recovered loop. The future would not erase all the losses, Kaito's absence, the vanished echoes of old ways, but would honor them. Beck paused, letting the wind stir the papers, pages of lives rewritten. "We carry forward the lessons of fracture," Farah said, her voice steadier than Beck remembered, her presence no longer casting a shadow of old pain, but shining distinctly. Together they pressed the first node of the new network, a system built on consensus. Failure acknowledged alongside innovation, all voices encoded in its foundation. As dawn turned to day, the tower's glass reflected not only itself, but the faces and hopes below. Beck and Farah looked out, and the city moved, not in patterns handed down or enforced, but in steps chosen and revised, a choreography of possibility. They lingered, not in triumph, but in quiet openness, a promise sparked in the neural dark, now carried forward by the thousands who dared to emerge from fracture, into a morning of choice and change.